Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Millennial Revolt, an independent political talk show that seeks to bring a different narrative than the stale one we have going on right now in the mainstream media. So, today we are going to be talking about President Trump's foreign policy because I think it's important that we do shine a light on his foreign policy, that we keep him honest, we hold his feet to the fire, because whether it's the left or the right, it seems that there is a uniparty where foreign policy is concerned, that we should engage in regime change, continue these imperialistic wars, continue these wars for oil, antagonize Russia, and try to start a fight with Iran. So there's so much to talk about, there's so much to get into, so let's just jump right into it. Throughout the Republican primaries and the general election, when Donald Trump was campaigning, he claimed that he was going to be a less interventionist president as far as his foreign policy is concerned. He said that he was opposed to nation building and he was opposed to misguided military interventions and invasions. He said that he was against regime change, but it seems that President Trump's foreign policy is going to go the way of previous administrations. Donald Trump seems as if he is going to follow the same neoliberal, neocon agenda that has basically encapsulated American foreign policy for decades. I always found it strange and slightly odd when President Trump said he was going to invest more money into our supposed depleted military. Mind you, 50% of our discretionary budget is spent on the military. And in 2015, the US had a defense budget of about $597 billion. According to the International Institute for Strategic Studies, when they released their most recent World Military Balance Report, we spend more on our military budget than 11 countries combined. And I'm going to show you a graph so you can see for yourselves. We spend more money combined than China, Saudi Arabia, the UK, Russia, India, France, Japan, Germany, South Korea, Brazil, and Australia. That is a problem that we have to fix, that we have to deal with. The reason why I am mentioning this is because at the end of fiscal year 2017, the US federal debt is estimated to be $20.1 trillion. According to the fiscal year 17 federal budget, President Trump wants to increase our military spending by $54 billion for the next year. That increase alone is roughly the size of the entire annual military budget of the United Kingdom, the fifth largest spending country in the world, and it's more than 80% of Russia's entire military budget in 2015. Now, if Congress were to follow President Trump's blueprint, the U.S. military budget could account for nearly 40% of the global military spending next year. And as a country, we already spend $600 billion a year on our military. During President Obama's tenure in office, he was known as the Nobel Peace Bomber-in-Chief because of his increase in drone strikes from the Bush administration. President Obama reportedly dropped 26,000 bombs in 2016. And under the Trump administration, U.S. drone strikes have gone up 432% since President Trump has taken office. President Trump has approved of 36 drone strikes or raids in 45 days, which means one day every 1.25 days. Now keep in mind the war that's going on in Yemen. We are aiding Saudi Arabia in their illegal war against one of the poorest countries in the Middle East. We already know from the Obama administration that with these drone strikes, they never usually get their intended target. There's usually huge civilian casualties. And so far, the Trump administration has provided little details about the casualties that has taken place. So that is already happening under the Trump administration, and it has been confirmed by the U.S. military that more ground troops are being sent to Syria. The U.S. is set to deploy 400 ground troops to Syria. The Trump administration is increasing its action within Syria previous to what the Obama administration did. This is a huge escalation that we're seeing. The new figures show the troops that have been sent to Manbij, as well as the artillery marines that have been deployed to Raqqa, as well as some other troops that have yet to be deployed. This number will slightly double the already stationed troops that are in Syria at the moment. Now, the US government has said that they have formally capped the number of troops in Syria to be at 503, right? Which basic math will show us that they have far exceeded that number. This is true in Iraq as well, where the Pentagon long deliberately lied about the official deployment to Iraq to stay under the cap by labeling thousands of troops as temporary but open-ended deployments. It does not appear that this is a total escalation proposed in the plan delivered by the Pentagon a few weeks ago, but this may be the first stage. This also does not include the reserve deployment of over 1,000 troops to Kuwait, which could be assessed at will by commanders in both Iraq and Syria for escalations. So this is a huge escalation on the part of the Trump administration at a time when President Trump repeatedly said that he was going to try to work with the Russians in Syria as well as the Syrian government, because any action that we are taking, the US government as well as the US coalition, is illegal under international law because they do not have permission by the Syrian government to be in Syria and to be operating militarily in Syria. If the US coalition was working with the SAA, which is the Syrian Arab Army, that is one thing. I can understand that. If they had permission by the Syrian government, that is one thing. I can understand that. But they are not doing that. We are continuously bombing in this country illegally. We are using drone strikes in this country, which has huge civilian casualties. Just look at President Obama's record on drone strikes and the toll that has taken on human life. You know, we are continuing to arm rebel groups in Syria. We are also continuing to support rebel groups while continuously calling for the removal of Bashar al-Assad, which is the president of Syria. So it's very confusing. It doesn't seem as if the Trump administration has veered far from the neocon, the neoliberal plan of regime change in Syria. It seems as if he may not be talking about it as much, but he is sticking to the path. More troop deployments, more bombings, a bigger escalation. We already see that Israeli airplanes are bombing in Syria again. Now they are bombing SAA army positions. Now, the Trump administration has said that they are going to wait to decide to send 1,000 troops to Kuwait to fight ISIS. The U.S. has already sent several hundred Marines to Syria to support allied local forces. Now, defense officials have said that they would establish an outpost from which they could fire artillery at ISIS positions some 20 miles away. U.S. Special Forces have already been deployed on the ground since the Obama administration, advising, quote unquote, the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, which is the SDF. Now, we know that majority of these troops who are, quote unquote, advising are usually fighting as well. So while all of that is happening in Syria, nobody is paying attention as to what's happening in Eastern Europe. Now, on my channel, I frequently talk about NATO's aggressive posture towards Russia, how NATO is building up troops on the Russian border, and how this could lead to a conflict that nobody could want. That is very dangerous for all parties involved. Now, one of the things that separated President Trump from his other Republican counterparts, as well as the Democratic candidates who were running, was his non-aggressive stance towards the Russian Federation. He wanted to particularly work with the Russian Federation because tensions have been at an all-time high during the Obama administration. Relations have dipped to an all-time low, and as of right now, it doesn't seem that it is going to be improving anytime soon. We recently had Nikki Haley, who is our ambassador at the United Nations, make some very bombastic statements saying that we should never trust the Russians. The Russians aren't our friends. They are basically always going to be our enemy. And that does not bode well for diplomatic relations. And as of right now, we have US and British troops currently being deployed in Poland, and they are ready to use lethal force against quote unquote Putin's army. So this is a dangerous escalation as what's happening, and it seems that there is no change in the neocon policy, as I previously said, and it is going to continue to push forward with this Russia is the enemy, we need to use force against them. Now, at least 900 US soldiers are set to join 150 British personnel on the Polish border in a bid to stop quote-unquote Putin grabbing more Baltic land following his supposed annexation of the Ukrainian province of Crimea. Now, keep in mind, the Crimeans had a referendum where they overwhelmingly voted to reunify with the Russian Federation. Now, the Western governments, as well as the British, the US government, and Germany, and many others, do not acknowledge this referendum and continue to say that Russia annexed Crimea. That is not the case. US Army Commander Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Gunter has confirmed the deployment as part of a NATO-led mission to control the region. It is not being treated as a drill, which means if they feel that they are in danger, they are ordered to shoot to kill. This is extremely dangerous because keep in mind, Russia is the second most strongest army in the world, with as much nuclear weapons as the United States. And I continue to stress this point because it must be brought home. I love my country. I love the US, I love my nation, but I am not in favor of our imperialistic wars of continuing to antagonize countries because we have to reign supreme. I don't engage in that stupidity, and I hope many people don't endorse that idiocy as well. The Lieutenant Colonel Gumter said, "This is a mission, not a cycle of training events. This purpose is to deter aggression in the Baltic and in Poland." Now, this comes after pleas by the Baltic states after Vladimir Putin moved missile systems within Russia and troops to an enclave of Kaliningrad, which borders Poland and Lithuania. Now, keep in mind, all of this was moved within their own country. Now, the lieutenant colonel has said that we are fully ready to be lethal. The Polish deployment is part of 4,000 NATO troops who will be placed across Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. 450 German forces have also been sent to Lithuania to work alongside Belgian and Danish soldiers in the region. 120 British troops from the 5th Battalion, the Rifles, have landed in Estonia to set up a base where hundreds of UK squaddies will lead the defense of the country. A fleet of 300 UK military vehicles are set to join them, including Challenger 2 tanks, Warrior infantry fighting vehicles, AS-900 self-propelled artillery pieces. The Defense Secretary Michael Fallon said, in the face of increasingly assertive Russia, NATO is stepping up its commitment to collective defense. Now tell me something. When you have a huge military alliance building up on your borders, how is Russia being the aggressors here? Now, this does not make any sense. Logically, this does not make sense. You have over 4,000 troops currently stationed in multiple Eastern European countries, soldiers along their border building up, more people coming, more tanks coming, more artillery coming. But they are being the aggressors when they are moving defense shields within their own country. They have to protect their people. Any sane leader who would see this buildup, see this military buildup, has to do something to protect their people, has to do something to keep the people who have elected them in mind. It makes no sense how we keep doing this over and over and over, but we're claiming another country is the aggressor. We see this time and time again. I mean, what on earth is multiple European governments thinking? Getting involved in more American neocon, neoliberal warmongering. Does anyone think this is smart? Does anyone think if you keep doing this shit, you're going to continue to be elected? You know, I understand the fact that European history is very complicated. It is very bloody. I understand the fact that many Baltic nations, as well as Eastern European countries, could be genuinely scared and worried about Russian aggression, given Russia's Soviet history. But they are not the Soviets anymore. And NATO is not the solution to any of these problems. Dialogue is always the solution. We shouldn't have huge military alliances building up on any country's border. That is never the solution. In November of 2006, Vladimir Putin said that he would move nuclear-capable missiles closer to Europe in response to NATO's expansion in the Baltic states. Why is his response to NATO's build on his borders not being blamed on NATO and its political leaders? This seems like multiple European countries, as well as the United States, is getting ready for war with Russia. This is what this seems like. And the fact that we have a media in the United States who keeps going on, Russia invaded our elections, it ignores what's actually happening in the world. You would think that the Europeans and the United States, if we were smart, instead of pushing Russia toward the east, towards China, Russia being a European country, we would actually want them involved in our politics. But no, because of multiple government stupidity, we have pushed Russia towards China, and now they are cooperating by default and mutual defense, which was not a case just a decade ago. You have the US, which is losing its top dog economic position, while the European Union continues its expansion and it's stumbling, so they are reverting to aggressive means to surround Eurasia under false pretenses and overreactionary military deployments. There will always be the likes of North Korea, which is a rogue state, but they do not justify a world war. While the West has to justify its huge arms and security industries, which employs hundreds of thousands and is a major contributor to the GDP of individual countries, but ultimately could be our own demise. And people really need to start waking up to this fact sooner rather than later. The fact of the matter is, Donald Trump is currently the president of the United States, which means the troop deployments in Syria, the United States Army being deployed in multiple Eastern European countries falls under the Trump administration, which means he has the power to work with the Syrian government to stop supplying arms to rebels, to stop the drone program, to stop our troops being deployed along the Russian border, to stop military buildup there. This falls under his administration. This falls under him. He is ultimately responsible for American troops. For a person, I had at least high hopes for his foreign policy. He wanted a reduction in these regime change, these aggressive wars. He wanted a reduction in the drone program, so he said. So it's going to be a long 4 years if this is already happening under the Trump administration and it's already March. I'm the Millennial Revolt. Thank you guys so much for watching and you have a wonderful day. Bye.